1987, a year after I was born.
This one is...
He's got to be like 2005 or 6.
His first buck was up Tie Fork. Dave, my brother-in-law, his family was up there, and then they seen an opening morning, disappeared. We went back up in the middle of the week, was in the same place. Shot my gun out about 4 times at it. Finally hit it and I rolled down the hill.
It was awesome. Awesome deer. I grew up staring at that buck.
This is the buck I chased for 3 years, videoed him. I finally caught up to him. We'd camped for 4 days and getting ready to leave, and he showed up, shot him, packed him out, called some friends. They come and helped us. This deer here is a Colorado deer. Shot him a few years ago. Seen him in the morning. He was rutting. He came back, and lucky enough, I snuck down and shot him to death. Literally shot him to death.
Literally, he died.
Yes.
You shot him and he did die.
He died. Shot him about 5 times. I don't like Barnes bullets.
Yeah.
You can edit that if you want. This old Dusty here shot this buck a long time ago in Wyoming. Had a great, it was so much fun.
Now, in case you're mistook, that's not a mule deer.
Yeah,
it's your pronghorn antelope.
Yeah, those are not spikes. I guess they are. But had a great time. He came in late one evening on some water and was lucky enough to harvest him. But it was a long time ago. So that's what I do.
Welcome to the Cuttercast Vlogcast. My name is Seth Larson. And on today's episode, I sit down with the one, the only Father Wisdom, who happens to be my father. And one of his dreams and aspirations for many years is to reach the 200-inch mark when it comes to harvesting a mule deer. Now, my dad's harvested plenty of really good mule deer. He's chased some really big bucks, but hitting that 200-inch mark has kind of eluded him as of yet. However, last year, he had the opportunity to make that dream, that aspiration, a reality when he drew, after 20 years of waiting, a limited entry mule deer tag here in the state of Utah. He found some incredible bucks. He had opportunities on bucks that would put him at that 200-inch mark, but a buck named Donald began to possess his mind and kind of distract him from those opportunities. He ended up leaving his hunt on the last day with a tag still in his pocket, unnotched. But he has no regrets. As a matter of fact, he says that it's one of the best hunts he's ever been on and one of the best experiences he's had while hunting. Now, there's a lot of lessons to be gleaned from his experience, and it's something that has bettered his life and my life. I'm a better hunter because of the experiences we had chasing mule deer together on this limited entry hunt. Now, this episode is called Tag Soup for the Soul, and I sat down with my dad and we recap the hunt. If you're watching, you're going to be able to see some pretty incredible mule deer. We'll share some photos and some videos of some of the bucks that we were chasing. So if you're listening, take some time and head on over to the Canvas Cutter YouTube channel and go ahead and watch this episode so that you can see these amazing mule deer. But without further ado, here's my father with Tag Soup for the Soul. Okay, awesome. You ready?
Yeah, this will be fun.
Yeah, of course. All right, folks, welcome to the Cuttercast. I've been looking forward to this episode pretty much since I thought of the Cuttercast over a year and a half ago. I've been wanting to do this one. It's fine-tuned, but the one and only Father Wisdom, my father, is here with us today, and we're going to be talking about an experience we had last year that could be a depressing experience for a lot of people, but I think there's a ton of positive takeaways from it, and an incredible experience and an awesome story. And there's going to be some photos and videos that we'll overlay with this. So if you're listening, make sure to head on over to the YouTube version and take some time to watch that too, so that you can see it. There's a few mule deer you may want to look at here. But Dad, thanks for coming on today.
Thanks for having me. This will be fun. I hope people enjoy it.
They will, because it's an awesome story. And because it's father wisdom. But Dad, maybe give us a little background. When did you start hunting? You were born in the 50s. So it was probably 60s, early 60s when you started hunting, or I guess mid 60s maybe. When did you started hunting? Like, did Grandpa take you hunting? Was it just like a thing that boys your age, you just always grew up with a .22 marching around shooting birds and everything? Or
I grew up in Orem, and when I grew up, it was nothing but orchards and fields. If you know where the Orem Rec Center is, that was just west of where I grew up, and that was all fields. And so my dad sort of had a rule that we couldn't have a BB gun or a pellet gun until we were 12 years old. And so around 10, I was the youngest. I was sort of spoiled. So about that age, he let me have a BB gun. And then from then on, I graduated to a pellet gun. I was constantly out shooting things. I had a great time. It was fun because once a year, it's not like it sort of is, but the opening day of fishing and hunting was a big deal. The opening of the deer hunt was huge. They would let school out. But we always went up on Squaw Peak, up by Provo Peak, and we'd get up like 2 o'clock in the morning.
like you, your
my dad,
brothers?
Probably me, my dad, and my brothers. And we'd go up there, and we had our place. Come sunlight, the deer would come up over the ridge, and we were pretty we were pretty successful. But God, as I've thought, over the years things have changed. You know, like my dad, 150 yards is a long shot. Don't be
right.
Yeah. Back then it wasn't like 1,000-yard shots. Or
did you have scopes on your gun?
Yeah, 4-power. That was the big thing. Yeah, and we had the old binoculars, 8 power, so they actually really did need to be a couple 100 yards. But we would usually harvest some okay bucks, 4-point.
Were you going for like a good 4-point back then, or was it more just like, hey, there's a buck, let's get it?
It was a good place. Usually mature bucks would come in there, and probably one of the biggest bucks my dad ever killed. It was like a year before. He sort of had a rule you had to be 12 before you could go actually deer hunting, because he didn't want a bunch of whiny kids up there. But there was always, they'd push, because Provo Peak's known for big bucks, and we would usually harvest 3-4-point mature bucks, and it was fun. I'll tell you what I love the most about it is we had a little farm, and life is busy, but on the hunts, my dad would be a different person. It was like, okay, my dad was funny. He'd tell stories about his childhood, which one was interesting that I haven't forgot, that when he hunted, he would tell me at my age, you would go up and you would actually pick out the buck you want. They hunted on up on Mapleton Mountain. Mm-hmm. And so he said, yeah, you'd go up there. They each had their own king. And then you could pick out, there'd be 8 to 10 bucks. You just pick out the one that you wanted to shoot and shoot it. So if my dad was just a different person. And I love that about it. And I sort of think that we're all a little different, that when we're in the mountains, it sort of changes. And so I enjoyed that. I had a brother that was just into hunting big time. And I think he's the one, because we would go once a year with my dad, but my brother hunted
all the time.
All the time. Anything and everything. I mean, he had dogs. He'd bring home lions, bobcats, and I just would think, oh, that's the coolest thing. So he sort of introduced me and really got me into it. So it sort of graduated along, and I really enjoy the outdoors. I enjoy sleeping under the stars.
Well,
So
I remember, like, from as early as I can remember, going up and riding along the tracks and seeing the elk. Like, we have home videos of me asking if I can shoot an elk with my pop gun, and you'd be like, no, and then you'd hear the pop gun go off.
Yeah.
Or like, you know, shooting guns into the canyon, and like from as early as I can remember, riding along while you guys were hunting, and always have a couple people in the back of the truck, you know, and doing the drive-by. And
yeah, I think for the first 30 years, I was pretty much a professional road hunter.
It was fairly effective back.
It was very effective, and it was fun. And I think one of the main things that switched is in the 90s, a group of us that I worked with started going into the Book Cliffs. And the first year in there, the guy I worked with shot really a good bull. And I'd rode horses in, and we shot this bull, and I had to hike out. And I had just bought this new Browning fleece stuff, and it had rained all day. And my fleece weighed about 100 pounds. And I was totally out of shape. And I really didn't think I was going to make it back to camp because I didn't have a horse to ride. So from that changed me. From that year on, we went there 10 years in a row, but I told myself I was going to be in shape. So from then on, months before, I'd start running after work before. And so that sort of just, I don't know, I got into that. It made it so much funner. We went in there 10 years. You went in a year. We had a year that I drew a tag, and that sort of...
Yeah, and we hiked all over. We were doing like 12, 14 miles every day.
Yeah, and it makes it so much more enjoyable. So from then on, I've really taken...
Yeah, you would do running, then you got into cycling. I mean, you've done a bunch of loader jaws and...
Yeah, I got overdosed in cycling. That's one of my passions.
Did CrossFit for a while.
So physically, I can hold my own. And so you have to remember that with the Oak Creeks, that it's brutal, but
yeah,
I'd like that. And I thrive on that kind of stuff. Another thing that you got to know about the Oak Creeks is probably way back, there was a buck that I chased for 3 years. And he was the smartest buck. And what made him interested is he had a big yellow collar on him, and how this buck made it. And back then, you know, he was 30 inch, and that was sort of the big thing. What he scored, I don't know, but he was a huge buck. We chased him for 3 years, never ever did catch up to him. And then he disappeared. There was a buck that I followed for 2 years. I worked for the railroad, so I hung out around Soldier Summit in that area. I chased this buck for a couple of years, videoed him during the winter. Smart buck. And so on the third year, I had decided when he gets hard horn, he goes into that oak, and you don't get him out. So I had a good neighbor. I told him he had an archery tag. I said, let's go see if we could find this buck. Long story short, we go up there on a Thursday, and my neighbor's up on the hillside, and I'm across the hill glassing, seeing if this buck, and I find this buck. He was in the bottom of the canyon, in the willows, by the stream, bedded. There probably was a 20-mile-an-hour wind, and so...
Which is kind of an interesting spot, too, because tons of people would go by not too far from it.
Yeah, probably
time,
less than 100 yards. People were driving by this buck, and he's just nested down in this thick willow patch. And so I radioed to Brad and said, hey, this buck's right. And so long story short, Brad goes over there, and the buck can't hear him because of the stream. He can't smell him because there's a 20-mile-an-hour wind. So Brad gets probably less than 10 yards. This buck stands up, and I'm watching through the spotting scope, and this buck disappears. And I see Brad sort of drop his bow, and I'm looking, and I'm Brad, what happened? And I'm looking for this buck to run out, and he never. And finally, Brad said, I think I got him. And so I go over there, and Brad had hit this buck right in the neck, broke its neck, and it dropped right in its tracks. We actually had to screw the broadhead was so hard in this buck's neck, we actually had to screw the arrow out to get, because we couldn't pull it out. And I think that buck scored around 197. Mm-hmm. Named him Red October.
Red October.
Yeah. So another buck I chased for a couple of years. I finally ended up. I went up. I chased him for. There was actually a big buck, and I seen him the first year. And I went in there, and I couldn't relocate him, and he ran with another buck that was a good buck, and we'll probably show some pictures of him. And I had this buck, and I had a fat cat at the time, and so I'm pulling out my muzzleloader.
So you find the buck.
I find the buck. He's a dead buck. And so he's right there. I pull my muzzleloader out, and the screw that holds the stock on had backed out and fell off. And so I had to let this buck go, and I couldn't relocate him that year. So the next year we went in there. Me, John, and another friend, we went in there and we sat for 4 days. Never seen a deer. And it was about 10:30 in the morning, and I said, that morning we had seen a few does finally, and I'm actually picking up my gear, my binoculars, and John says, hey, I think there's some other deer over there. And I'm sort of just, oh, John, they're the same dang deer we've been seeing all morning. He said, no, I think they have horns. And so we threw up our binoculars, and the buck had come in there.
The buck that you had chased previous years.
But the bigger buck, I mean, he was a toad. That thing had more trash on him. I never could relocate him. But this buck that I'd chased this would have been the third year. Finally, so I laid down. I had made a custom 6mm 284. Mm-hmm. Let him have it. He was like 520 yards. He comes over the hill, lays down. And then the friend of mine sees a 5x4, and he shoots him. So we're clear back up in there.
So you went from 4 days seeing nothing. All of a sudden these bucks pull in. One of them's the one you've been after for a few years.
Yeah, and and I've sort of learned over the years that I actually made everybody a T-shirt a sweatshirt that year. 1 out of 9 times. I'd go in there probably 10 times, and out of the 10 times I would see these deer once because of their rotation, of them going nocturnal. So anyway, that's sort of my pass. I like to find a buck. In fact, I found a few this year that we're going to go after, and rather, so it's a game to me. It isn't like, and we have some other tags.
Well, it's a challenge, right?
Yeah. So I have a Wyoming elk tag and deer tag, but I can't do the same. I'm going to go there, and the biggest bull or the biggest buck I'm going to shoot that I find. But in Utah, where I have time, I like to find these bucks, and I like to find them down in some place that other people aren't going to likely disturb them, and then it's a game to see if I can outsmart them or they because if they go nocturnal or so anyway.
So that's kind of a history you've had with hunting.
Yes.
Is you find an animal and you usually get really focused in on that animal until you either get it or they walk out of your life forever.
Yeah, and I won't, because if I shoot something less, then I will never. And it always seems when you shoot the lesser, boom, there he is. Yeah. So I've sort of learned that, no, I put my sights on something. And people can say what they want, but you get a buck that's 5-6 years old. That dude's smart.
Oh,
He'll go nocturnal. Yeah. And you can see him usually when they're soft horned. But I like the old saying, the harder the horn, the harder the hunt. Mm-hmm. Because it's like Red October. That dude, once he got hard horn, he got in that oak, and you were never going to get him out of there. And so the two things. One is I like to set my sights on one buck, and
fitness is pretty important to
fitness,
you.
Yeah.
It's like a huge part of your life.
Yeah. So if it's rugged, ugly, bring it on. It doesn't bother me at all.
Which sets us up for after your Book Cliffs elk hunt that we talked about briefly, you started to put in for a limited entry mule deer hunt. Before that, you'd been putting in for elk. You drew that limited entry tag. So now you've got a 5-year waiting period anyway, and you start putting in for a limited entry mule deer tag when you're 45 years old. And I was 13 at the time.
Yeah.
And you've been putting in for popular units back in the day. Well, I guess they still are popular. I feel like the Henrys has left off a little bit. But so you've been putting in for these units, and 19 years goes by, and you finally pop a tag.
Yeah.
And it's in a unit, the Oak Creeks, that you have only put in for the last 3 of those years. So we haven't spent a lot of time on the Oak Creeks at all. But you pop the tag, and starting pretty much as soon as we feel like the deer are going to start growing, you start going out there and spending a lot of time putting up cameras, glassing, and trying to figure out the lay of the land so that we know where we're going when the hunt starts. And in doing so, you find a whole posse of bucks. But there's one in particular that catches your eye. At the beginning, we called him the V-Buck because he just had tree trunks growing out of his head and forming a V. That was the first trail cam photo that you got of him. And so we were like, oh, the V-Buck. And there was Notch, this deer with notches in its ears, huge mass, just a 4-point, but his shed's right here, actually, that you picked up too. It's tons of mass, just bottle cap mass. And by bottle cap, I mean pop bottle mass. But so you do all this scouting, and you start zeroing in on a buck.
Yep.
But he gives us some fits for a while, because we know he's in between a couple canyons, and you had seen him a few times in a canyon, and then he kind of would just disappear, and we had a rough time turning him up.
I actually, a couple of years, I'd put in for the muzzleload hunt for the Oak Creeks and didn't draw it. And then Riley hit the bow shop, talked me in 2019 to putting in with his wife, thinking that we'd draw. And he grew up out there and knew the country. And it's all he told me is, that's all you have to do is show up. And I thought, oh, okay. And then the next year I decided, I had to go down and tell him, I think I'll just do this myself, because when you get my age, every year could be the last year. And I had 20 points. And I love archery because when you're in the mountains and you're archery hunting, everything changes. I mean, you start paying attention to the wind, the dirt, the what. You pay attention to everything. And I think people that are successful archery are a lot better at that than me. So I put in, I had 20 points.
Well, to be fair, like, you archery hunted back in the day when they had like iron sights, but then you took a hiatus for almost 25 years because most of my life, like, I remember going to a cornfield and you guys shooting into a hay bale or something when I was young, but we didn't archery hunt until like 2015, 16 is when we both decided, hey, we should start trying that, right? Yeah. So to be fair, like, people can get pretty legit when it comes to archery hunting, but most of them have been doing it their whole entire life every year, and we're still kind of newbies at it. So the fact that you were going to do it on the archery hunt was also picked up the game because Riley suggested that's probably your best option.
Yep.
But the problem with it, if anybody has seen or Googled the oak cricks, it is like straight up and straight down everywhere. Like, if you are not in shape and you're going to archery hunt that, good luck. Like,
it's
good
brutal.
Luck. Yeah.
And in fact, I spent the whole summer out there, and I went through.
And when he says whole summer, he's not exaggerating. He spent like almost every single day all summer long. Like, you would come home Thursday night, be home Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and go back out.
Yeah, all summer.
Summer.
I think about, I have just the best wife, and she's extremely supportive. And so, I would just go out there, and it was fun. I went out when the gates were locked up Oak Creek Canyon. I hiked back up in there in the snow. I mean, I knew I was going to draw the tag because it only took like 15. I had 20 points. I knew the tag was mine. So I went out and started getting familiar way before. In fact, way before there was snow. I seen a few does. And so I just took off. And every week I'd go out there, and I started with that. I started with the main canyon, and I just so happened to go up and dropped over, and I went in this canyon, and I glassed, and I could see a camera in the bottom, so I drifted down over in there, and I thought, oh my gosh, I could see where somebody, and I could see some fresh deer tracks, so I decided, hey, the next week I'm going to come up here and throw a camera in here. So I did, and and there was I put some other cameras up around in there, but I went back the following week, and that's the first time I'd seen Notch or Heavy. He showed up on my camera, and it looked like he had 2 Coke cans coming out of his head. Yeah. And I just fell in love with this buck. And I had a picture of the V buck, but I never thought he was just huge coming out. But I fell in love with Notch. And so we'll show you hopefully some pictures of him. So then from then on, I just took off. Every week I picked a different canyon. They started to develop in a little more, and I went in the canyon where I'd been seeing him, and then I had actually I renamed him to Donald.
The V-Buck morphed into Donald. And when you saw him this time, he had put on
a lot.
And
I apologize.
A couple hundred inches.
I apologize for the video. I got to tell you this story because it's pretty funny. I apologize for the video because I'd never really ever videoed. I'm not any of that, so I tried foams. And you'll see the pictures of him, but it's still impressive. And so I go home on Thursday night, and I take my wife out to lunch the next day, and I'm showing her some of this video, and she says, "Well, what is that?" And I'm looking, and I go, she goes, "How many points does it have?" I go, "I don't know." She goes, "Well, isn't it sort of dumb to be out there all this time, video and watching these bucks, and you can't even come home and see what they are?" And so I thought, oh my gosh, yeah, that's pretty dumb. So the next week, On my way home, I stopped by the bow shop and I get me a new spotting scope, which made all the difference in the world. So, and I mean, I had a good spotting scope, but it wasn't.
It wasn't Swaro, right?
Yeah,
And
it wasn't
Riley
the same.
talked you into it.
Yeah, Riley could talk to me about it.
Yeah, he can sell ketchup to a woman in white gloves. It's pretty.
Yeah,
he's good.
So anyway, that was a game changer, and that made all the difference because I could go out now.
Have your sights changed now a little bit because there's still Notch, but now you have Donald and we can get into why you named him Donald, but he is like way over 200 inches, significantly giant everywhere, and it's like,
everybody from the previous year knew about this buck. In fact, when I dropped in and put the camera in, I would always stop on my way home if the bow shop was, and I would talk to Riley because he grew up out there, and he told me that that canyon that you're in, and I love Riley because he didn't say go to this point, put a camera, go to here. He would say, hey, you might want to go up.
Maybe
and
check
hike.
This canyon out.
And I love that because then I could just go explore. And so he goes, oh, yeah, the biggest buck on that mountain will be there in that canyon. And when I took in Notch in the picture of the V-buck, he said, hey, that V-buck is going to explode. And I'm thinking, no, Notch has got coke cans,
Look at that mask.
But he did. So I went up that time, and first time I seen him, I was so pumped. And he hung out with Notch. I mean, they were like best friends. So where the one was, and the time it just was unreal. This one morning, there was like 5 raghorns, 4 spikes, a bunch of cows and calves, and 30 bucks. And I'm trying
in a canyon,
all on one little hillside, and I'm trying to catch up to them all. And I'm jumping around, and I just fell in love with. With Donald.
This hunt changed my life too, just because of what I learned, and like I appreciated mule deer before this hunt, but I've always been an elk guy. Like, if you could tell me, would you rather go elk hunting or mule deer hunting, I'd pick elk every single time. Before this hunt, I'd always elk were my jam. Mule deer were cool, but there's just like this stigma in my mind around mule deer, and like a lot of people who are real hardcore hunters that chase them, and I don't know why I made that voice with it, but I got it. I got bit by the mule deer bug with this hunt. They are awesome. They're incredibly intelligent big mule deer bucks, and glassing them. And we found another one, an inline buck that was pretty awesome.
Yeah,
really cool.
I had
cool
him.
Buck. And we probably had him dead to rights if we wanted to. But your sights, your goals shifted to Donald, and fast forward through the summertime. Every day except the weekend, you're out there trying to figure it out. Riley keeps giving us hints without just blatantly telling us on maybe you should look at this spot. And we would go and glass, and we'd see some elk, we'd see a deer or so, but we could not turn Donald up. And it was getting super frustrating because the hunts are fastly approaching and we can't turn him up. And we keep getting hints that he's in this area, and he's not showing up on cameras. And we're glassing regularly and can't turn him up. And so when the hunt starts, Donald is still in our sights. And there's a really wide buck, large forks. He had a kicker on one side, like a big cheater on the one side, that showed up on a camera. No, you filmed him.
Yeah, I filmed him, and then we seen him.
And then we saw him going up over a ridge, and we're just like, oh my word. And but the hunt starts, and when the hunt starts, we don't know where Donald's at, and we haven't seen him for probably over a month since the last time you had seen him. And but that's still kind of our goal. There were a handful of deer that were on our hit list that if you had the opportunity, I think you may have taken, but we kept sidetracking ourselves off of those deer for Donald. And I think it was, I don't know if it was the opening morning or into the hunt. A lot of the days blend together. But I remember we glassed up that wide buck, and he had a deer with him that wasn't very wide but was incredibly tall, huge forks, really heavy. We called him Crabs because he looked really crabby in the front, but his forks were close together, but they were really long, and they came clear in, and then huge back forks. So he was running with that wide buck with the cheater. And we found them, and we couldn't find Donald. And
well, I had been told that the 1st of August that these deer would shift. And so I'd been warned that, you're going to have to relocate these deer. And so opening morning, I mean, for 20 years I'd dreamt of this hunt and that I was going to throw everything that I had into it. And so opening morning, it's probably something that I always thought about. That night I had hiked up on the top of this mountain, and I had hiked in a blind, and so I stayed in the blind.
That's right.
And I was thinking, okay, these bucks might come out, and I did. I had some pretty decent bucks come by my blind in the morning.
I completely forgot that. Yeah, you spent the night in the blind.
One of the things I always just dreamt on and envisioned was just being there, being on the mountain, waking up, and these bucks, and they were there. And so we took off that day. We had all 3 of these canyons covered. So I just started cutting, and we'd seen this wide buck. He was way over, and so he was two very large canyons over. So I start cutting these canyons, and Seth finds these fairly decent. No, that was another time. So I go clear across there. We see some good bucks drop out. And then so the next day we get up, and we'd seen some bucks, thinking, okay, maybe he's over in here. So I hike up in there, and he's not, but there's some bucks, and just to play around with them, I sneak in, and I think I get with under 50 yards of these bucks. We're just practicing our
because like you hadn't stalked an animal before, right? And this is a pretty incredible tag. What I also want to point out, well, 2 things is that area is so crazy because there are so many good bucks, like exceptional bucks, I should say, that you start calling really good bucks small. Yeah. Like we were seeing 170s, 180 deer, 180 class deer, mule deer every day.
Yeah.
And we were calling like mid 180 bucks small.
Yeah.
And I remember coming back at night being like, we literally are calling this buck small. It's like 185 inches. But you would also on occasion see a buck pushing 200 or over 200, and there's just in a different class. And so when you see that, you're like, oh, I get it. And then 170 bucks really do look small.
They are.
When you've been glassing a 200-inch buck on occasion. And I remember we saw a buck that and there's no shade on the Oak Creeks. Like it's just bake in the sun. So John and Matt and I were making like these makeshift shades to like crawl under the glass all day long, and we were finding deer all day, which I was super excited about because I've always wanted to be a good glasser, and the Oak Creeks taught me how to glass for mule deer. And I was finding them bedded and under cliffs and all over. Yeah,
we'll show you the picture of this and see if you can. I was looking at it last night. We'll see if you can spot this. This buck's in a cliff under a ledge. Yeah. And I had to look at it again for a few minutes to see his horn. I mean, that's where they go. And it's to put a stock on because it's such shelly, marbly. It's pretty tough.
But you practice a couple stocks, and
yeah,
you actually got within shooting range.
Yeah, we sort of had a method that we would hike halfway up the hill. And to be very truthful, some days I would get a little mad because they'd be on the radio, you got to get up the top. There's a big buck up the top. And I'm thinking, no, I'm after Donald. And so it's hard to have your crew there every day, and they hike halfway up this miserable. It takes,
word.
And it's just miserable. And then they see a nice buck, and you say, no, I'm looking for. So I would humor them.
Nice buck. We would say you need to go after this buck because it's like 200 inches or above. So it wasn't ever like, oh, there's a 170-inch buck.
They were big bucks.
They were big bucks, but you had your eyes set on Donald.
Yeah, it was Donald or bust. And so I would hike up there, and the whole time I'd be thinking, I just want Donald. I mean, I'm hiking up here, and I want Donald. And I'd get up there. I remember the one time, and it's brutal, but I'm in good shape.
Yeah,
I'm blowing up the hill.
Yeah, and you've been hiking it all summer.
I get up there, and I'm going to drop over, and some doe is on the other side. I remember that, and she blows me out. And so these bucks take off. And so I've hiked all the way almost to the top. And so I turn around. But let's jump into Donald. I fell in love with this buck. I wanted him. In my lifetime of the 20 years, this is sort of a once-in-a-lifetime buck. And I thought, I can go out probably and turn up some 180 bucks somewhere in there.
You've killed some really good 170s.
Yeah, and I can turn them up
bucks,
again. And so I'm thinking, no, this buck, I'm guessing, is around 250. And I thought I'll never have a chance to chase a buck this big. And so I just set my sights on him. So we're doing the same routine, and I'm going up there to my spot, and Seth's across the canyon on me, and I see Donald and I see Notch. And it's a week before September 1st. And September 1st brings on the governor's tag and the sportsman's tag. So these guys are popped in there. They're trying to find Donald,
and by these guys, we mean two outfitting agencies with their 20 guides have showed up. And that day, I was by myself glassing. John and Matt were working. And you were by yourself across from the canyon. Yeah. And we turned up Notch. And you were already up there. And Notch and Donald from the beginning had kind of been hanging out with one another or within the same vicinity of one another. They were always near one another. So we found Notch, and there's he's very distinguishable. He just gobs of mass, not real big forks. He was just old, gnarly, massive buck. And we saw him, so we were like, Donald has to be
so
here.
I hike up there, and we sort of lose track of Notch or Heavy. Mm-hmm. And then that evening, Seth glass up Notch. And Notch is heading back down the canyon. And so we have about a 20-mile-an-hour wind. I remember that blowing really hard. So windy. Seth gets me on Notch, but it's impossible for him to watch Notch and watch me because we're feeling like Notch is going to take us to Donald. Mm-hmm. And sure enough, it's probably it is the last video that we have of Donald. Notch takes us. And so I'm up above. I'm coming down. The wind's blowing. It's late in the afternoon and the sunset. And, I'm trying to get down, and I'm asking Seth. It's very,
where am I at?
Where's the buck at? Where are you at? I'm thinking, you don't know where I'm at, but So he's trying to locate me in the buck, and it's just
and I'm trying to like I've followed Notch.
Yeah.
You like were stalking in on Notch. He bumped and started going down the canyon. So I'm following him with my glass, and I start phone scoping him, and lo and behold, like I see another buck. So I'm like, oh, what's that by him? And it's Donald feeding there. And he would like take a couple bites and put his head up. And there's 4 little bucks with him. And when I mean little, I mean like 150, like small bucks with him, which is funny. And they're just feeding away. And he was like checking the wind, looking up all the time. Nibble, nibble, look up. And so I take a photo of the hillside and I circle where the deer are, because you have asked me like twice, can you see me? And I'm like, no, I can't. And so I would ask, where are you at? And I would try to glass you with my 15s, and I couldn't find you. Like, you just disappear into the hillside with your camo on. And I don't want to lose track of these deer that we've been dreaming of getting this whole time. And so I'm like, I took a picture of the hillside. I circled where the deer were on it, and I sent it to you. And I was like, I don't know where you're at. This is where the deer are. Try to figure out where you're at from this. But you're on that hillside, so it's really difficult to figure out the topography of it to know where you're at.
Yeah, and it was getting late, the wind, and I figured by the time I got there it'd be too dark. So I just told Seth, let's just back out. There's a good chance he's going to be right in here someplace in the morning. And so we backed out.
Well, you had gotten close enough to bump them, right?
Yeah, I was coming down really close, and then I'm just feeling I can't.
So frustrating.
The best way to hunt that is to spot him in the morning and put him to bed, and then sneak. When they're up, he was so alert.
He was the smartest deer I've ever watched.
He was so alert.
I've never seen a deer do that. He literally would take like a few bites and then head up, nose to the air, looking around, like looking all around, and then back down. And you bumped him. I don't know how close you got, because I don't know where you were. Like you could have been within like a longer bow range before you bumped them.
Yeah,
but they bumped and they came down in the bottom of the canyon. I got great video and photos of him with a couple really small bucks. And Notch went the exact opposite way. Donald and these small bucks dropped down into the very bottom of the canyon, and Notch went up the canyon and around and out the top.
I figured the next morning for sure that he would be somewhere in there. Mm-hmm. So now you've got to figure that we have the governor's tag and we have the sportsman's tag. And so there's a lot of people in this area. And
everybody's looking for Donald.
Everybody's out to get Donald. And to be honest, these guides were super cool to us. They didn't want to interfere with us. In fact, they were cheering us on. They were hoping, sorry if you're one of these, but they were really wanting the old man to kill this buck with the bow. And I appreciate that. I just sort of figured, well, if you want me to kill it that bad, why don't you just come on my team?
Yeah, why don't you just go ahead and leave or
so to move on, we got up the next morning. We located Notch, but Donald was not with the group.
Yep,
Donald had peeled out. And long story short, that was the last time we saw Donald.
However, we got all worked up again, because later that afternoon you're like, I think I found Donald. I didn't get
I think it was a few days.
Was it a few days later?
A few days later. I mean, you guys got to realize I'm pounding this thing every day. I'm climbing. Day. And if you know where Scipio is, next time you drive by Scipio, you look at that old cliffy mountain and you figure I'm climbing that thing every stinking day.
And I remember driving by that like my whole life, every time we'd go south, and I'd always just be like, I wonder if there's deer on there. And are there deer on there? Yeah. That's
where I'm climbing every day. And so this day I decided, I'm gonna leave the spotting scope. I'm just gonna take my binoculars.
Yeah,
so I run up there, and
I'm across from you. You're going up the ridge.
We're in our
in
places.
the middle, and I'm going to my spot.
So I'm glassing, and I see this buck. And if you remember back, we called him the V buck. Mm-hmm. And so the first thing I notice about, and I only have some tans, and so I'm looking at this, and I can see that he V's, and I can see that he has a little extra trash. And he's sort of in the oak, and he feeds down, and he goes up this little slot. And so I radioed at Seth, and I said, Seth, I think we have Donald again. And so it was...
You tell me kind of where he's at. So I pack all my stuff up because I've got, in order to get a view of where you were talking about, I needed to go up the ridge several hundred yards. So I pack all my stuff up, and I bust up and get underneath a cliff where I can see into that chute. And I creep down, and the chute really is only like 200 yards below me. So I creep, and I get set up with my glass, and you start over, and I find a buck, but it's no Donald.
Yeah, it's
like I thought he was small. He's probably high 170s actually, but from my angle, he was just a 4-point, and there was another chute that maybe what we thought was Donald could have been bedded in, and there were a couple bedding spots that I couldn't see from where I was at that he could be. So I was just like, I'm just going to glass here. In order for you to even get in a position to work, you had to drop down a giant ridge, go clear up, almost not quite to the top, but up 2/3 of a mountain, and then come down a chute to get on a cliff above where they are in this chute, running north and south. And as you're doing that, I'm glassing, this smaller buck gets up. And I was like, oh, he's going to rebed, so maybe the other ones will get up and rebed too. And he drops down, and I could not believe it. He like crawls underneath this cliff, this tiny, and he beds up clear up in there, and no buck, no other buck. And I was just like, Dad, if Donald's here, he's in a chute that I can't see. And we called Riley, and we were like, hey, Riley, we think we found Donald again. And so he buzzed on over there, and he was clear down on the road with his big eyes glassing up, and he could see things I couldn't, and I could see things he couldn't. And this whole time, I'm keeping track of you two, and you're coming down. Boom, when you're coming down, you're still a few hundred yards above them coming down the chute, just nice and slow. I find another buck bedded under another cliff, and he was bigger, but it wasn't Donald. But from my vantage point, he looked like a good buck, but he didn't look huge. And I don't know what it was from the angle that I was looking, but I even took pictures through the phone scope and sent them to Riley, and we were both like, I said, I think he's around mid 180s. Like, what do you think? And he's like, I would totally agree with that. And so you make your way down, and it was unbelievable. Like, I want everybody listening or watching to understand this is like the 4th ever stalk, like purposeful stalk you've made. And you make this unbelievable stalk down a canyon, up a mountain, down a chute to get on this cliff above them. And when you start getting close, you just start going really, really, really slow. And it takes you like 30 minutes, and you get over to the cliff. And what was crazy is by the time you got over to the cliff, the smaller buck had disappeared. I had no idea where he went. And then all of a sudden, he was back bedded down. It was the weirdest thing. He was like gone. And then a few minutes later, he was back. And then the bigger buck did the exact same thing, completely disappeared. You were right above them. And I was like, I don't know if you blew them out, if they got wind of you, but the way you were over them with the cliff, that usually you're good with the wind. And usually you're good with them hearing you too. So I was like, I don't know. And then all of a sudden he's back. And I was like, hey, Daddy's back. And my biggest regret, which we're telling a story that has no regrets for you, but it's a regret for me. Because since I was young, I've always wanted you to get a 200-inch buck or bigger. Like, it's always been a goal of yours. Like, we'd always talk about it. And you've killed a lot of really good bucks. I've always wanted you to get to that mark. And me and Riley were just like, he's not there. Like, it's a mid-180s buck. He was a 4x6. And so we were like, if you have the opportunity, maybe don't shoot. Because we both felt like, we still had a couple weeks, like a week and a week, about a week. And we're like, you can get a bigger buck. And you came back and were like, I'm going to go down that chute. The chute they were bedded in the bottom of. And I was just like, oh, okay, sweet. Yeah, do it. Like, see how close you can get. Yeah. And?
Well, I still felt like Donald could be in there somewhere.
Well, he for sure could.
And I was thinking, okay, I know these 2 bucks are underneath me and I have a chute, and maybe Donald might try slipping up one of these chutes. So, I am glassing, looking, and these guys are telling me, these 2 bucks are below me.
Well, and there's still a chute that I can't see because it runs east and west, and Riley doesn't have a great look at it either. He just doesn't feel like a buck would go into that one. But so, Donald could be there. Donald could be around. We didn't know.
We didn't know. So it was just an incredible day. I started about 10 o'clock that morning when we had bedded these, and it was probably getting around 4 or 5 o'clock that afternoon by the time I got over there. And of course we have all the guides watching us and wondering what the crud these guys are doing.
Yeah, there's like 15 to 20 guides in this canyon glassing on the ridges.
And they're watching, and so I slipped down there, and one thing I learned with these little chutes and is the wind can be, I played the wind the best I could, but in one little swirl, the wind can suck down one of those little chutes. Mm-hmm. And I'm not that knowledgeable on, but I really tried to play the wind. And so I am right. I range the one, and I'm 23 yards.
Wait. You start sneaking down the chute, and I can't see the small one anymore.
Right.
And the big one that was bedded blows out of his bed. And then I see you draw back. Okay, now continue, because that's an important detail. He has gotten down into the chute. You were 20 yards away from him when he was bedded.
These bucks are right there. And I think the wind swirled, and the one come out, and then the other. And I pull back because I have a Garmin. So I'm ranging them, and they're like under 50 yards. And
the bigger one's looking at the smaller one.
Yes, I have the bigger one broadside, less than 50 yards.
Looking up at the smaller one. The smaller one's the one that sees you. The bigger one's just like, what are we doing?
He's turned around looking at me. And this is once in a lifetime. So just to know that every morning I got up and I shot my bow, and every night, and I didn't want anything over 70 yards, but I was from 70 on in, I was deadly. So this buck easily I could, and the one buck's turned around, and
under 50,
and he is just beautiful. Idea. Then I have this other buck, the bigger buck, that's just broadside to me, and he doesn't even know I'm in the game. No. Because he's looking at the other buck wondering, dude, like, why did you bounce? Yeah. Why did we do this? And so I'm sitting there just thinking. And then you guys don't shoot them. Don't shoot those.
Don't shoot it.
Because
it comes out, don't shoot it.
To be honest, I wouldn't have anyway, because I was after one buck. But it was cool. That imprint is... in my mind, I can see it today, that buck, and they're just so beautiful.
I can see you drawn back,
turned around, looking at me, and this bigger buck's looking at him, thinking, "Why'd you get me up out of that bed?" But it was fun. Then they ran over. They ran by
they came
you.
right underneath me.
Yeah.
And when they came underneath me, I was like,
Holy
crap.
Big
Crap,
bucks.
we may have made a mistake. The one that I thought was small, like I legitimately thought he was like 150s, 160s.
Yeah,
he was actually more like 170s. And
He's
like
a big
good buck.
That 4-point.
A good buck.
I
A
would
good
say
looking
the
buck.
4-point was a 180
And the
class
the
buck.
4x6, I was just like, holy shiz.
Yeah.
Like, that is a big buck. And they came running underneath me and over. And I grabbed my stuff, and you're like, I'm going to go down the wash. And I was like, all right, I'll see you down at the bottom. And I'm trekking down the ridge, and I get to the knob that has mossback guides and Wade Lemon guides and like all these people glassing, and the mossback guys were like, did your dad get a shot? I was like, no. How close did he get? He got to 20 yards, and then they bumped and stopped at 40. He was drawn. He could have shot. He didn't shoot that 4x6. And they had a name for it. Like, I was like, no. And they're like, oh, your dad's so badass, like out here 66 years old stomping around these hills, putting us all to shame. We hope he gets that big buck. We're all rooting for him. I'm like, well, yeah, if you were, you wouldn't be here. But and I joked around with them, and they thought it was funny that we called him Donald because everybody was after him.
Yeah.
And they were like, did you see that shed your dad picked up? I was like, no. He's like, yeah, you just come walking out of the wash with this big shed. It's huge mass. You got to go check that thing out. It's like, all right, I will. Bounced down to the bottom, and you had picked up Notch's shed.
Yeah, from the previous year.
Yeah.
So that was probably from then on.
We didn't know. We hunted very hard.
Yes.
And there was a couple 180 class bucks that we found that we could have gone after. But none of the deer on our hit list were seen again. And we learned something that we didn't know that would have been important to know.
Extremely important.
When they rub, they disappear.
Yeah.
Like they start going into thick stuff, and their routine changes. Because the only deer we saw after that day were deer that hadn't rubbed yet.
Yeah, my last stalk was on that 4x6, and it was the day before it closed. And same canyon, going down in there. The wind was coming
Not
up
good.
the canyon, but not good. And we had him bedded, and he was bedded in a horrible place. Going down there, and these guys spot this 4-point that's laying below me, and the wind swirled, and he busted out, took the other buck. And I think I know it was the first time in months. And I hiked back to Seth, and Jeff was there helping us. And it was, honestly, I had a day and a half left to hunt. And it was the first time that it registered in my brain that I might not get a buck. I might not get Donald.
Yeah.
And I actually was a little emotional because I always thought that
It was going to come together.
it was going to come together, and it didn't. And I'd put about everything in it that I had, and it probably was one of the best hunts I will ever. And I don't, but it doesn't bother me to go out and spend a week by myself. In fact, I sort of like,
Yeah.
I have these conversations. So going out there, spending all this time glassing and
seeing all the deer that we saw,
the elk, deer,
the elk, the experiences that we had, the things that we learned, like it was really fun throughout it. And there were multiple deer we could have gone after, and you probably could have got. I mean, that 4x6 broadside, 42 yards.
We could have. I felt very comfortable that if we wanted, we'll show you the pictures of that in line with the cheater. Pretty much had him patterned, and in fact, I found out that he died not very far from where I'd seen him all summer long. It's just, I wished I would have known that around the 1st of September when they rub, they turn hard horn,
and
they disappear. And I've asked people, where do they go? And they just go in They just go in thicker stuff.
Yeah,
and
for
you're
example,
not going to.
Nobody, with all those outfitters, with all those guides on the mountain, nobody turned Donald up until the rut. And he showed up and he was all broken up.
Yeah, he
disappeared.
He'd made it, and
Notch got killed on the muzzleloader.
Yeah, the inline got killed. The wide, tall buck got killed. And I don't know. I sort of fell in love with these. I spent the summer with these deer, and Riley sent me a picture of Notch in the back of somebody's truck, and I texted him back that, oh my gosh, they killed a member of my family. How dare they? But for 20 years, I had dreamt of this hunt. I mean, I know you guys are out there at work and you're putting in, but for 20 years, every year, figured, if I pop this tag, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that. And those 20 years, all the things that I imagined, I did. No regrets.
Which is crazy, because a lot of people, if they eat tag soup, some people will do it out of like stubbornness, but be upset like, I should have just got that buck, or I should have just got this buck, or I should have done this. But like, your outlook on it is like, it's one of the best hunts you've ever had, and it was incredible.
It was the best summer, best time. I mean, just the opportunity and to go out and see. I was hesitant to call people to come in and help me glass. I had friends because they would see some of these 190, 200-inch bucks, and they'd probably be calling me, "Hey, I got a big buck over here." Yeah. But no, I was looking for one. It was phenomenal. There's
yeah, it was an incredible place.
I kept hoping Lady Luck would be with me this year, and I'd draw the Sportsman's tag or the Expo tag and get a repeat on it. But it's okay, And something that's always been with me when I was younger, I killed a lot of. I don't want to say a lot, but my share, and it came to the point that was, I mean, how many 20-inch, 24-inch bucks do I really need to kill? I'd sooner chase a mature buck that's
like a once in a lifetime. You will
that's who I am. Let some young kid that's never killed a buck kill. He'd be thrilled over a 24-inch buck, but it doesn't trip my trigger anymore. I'd love to go find big bucks and then see who's. And unfortunately, they always seem.
We've been in the losing category for a while, but this is our year.
This is our year.
We found a couple good bucks, and we've got a lot of good hunts. We got Wyoming mule deer, and you have your Wyoming elk tag. We both have mule deer tags. You got a Colorado tag
that should be good.
Arizona Coues deer tag. We've got a lot of good hunts.
Yeah,
and
the opportunity was there. So how do you regret? I could have went and killed the 200. Well, I shouldn't say it. I probably could have killed
you could have for sure killed a 200-inch deer, though you didn't. Yeah.
Yeah, but I set my sights. So that's why I told you of my past history, that's who I am. I like to go after big bucks. Just a lot of good people.
Yeah.
I mean, there's people I met. I don't know the guy's name, but he had a horse, and he would come and talk to me, and he'd ride his horse up the canyon and then come back. And in fact, one Sunday, he brought his wife up there to meet me. I was come in, and I mean, it was during the hunt. I mean, there was just so many cool people.
Yeah.
And I always like to go in the middle of the week because I never seen anybody in the middle of the week. And if you want a few,
so you can do that.
Yeah, if you want a few takeaways of what I do, if I drew that tag again, I wouldn't. I started out with 10 cameras. I bought 10 more, and then I bought 6 cell cameras. So I had a ton of cameras up there. Most of my summer was spent packing bait. Each week I had a routine of the cameras. I'd go rebait them. and I'd never do that again. Never.
Yeah, it didn't do anything.
It didn't do anything. And in most of those canyons, there's 4 or 5 cameras. There's bait. I mean, there's just too much. And gee, I do all this work, and especially on my cell cameras, within 2 or 3 hours, here'd be all these domestic cows devouring all this bait that I'd work my buns to get in there. I think the buck that Sean Morgan killed, see, I had cameras on the other 2 canyons, but I didn't have not that one. And that buck lived in these 2 canyons, and I had mine on the outsides of them. And I thought Sean Morgan was a stud. He called me and, gave me some information, sent me some pictures. And I thought he was, and that's sort of how my whole hunt was. The people reached out to me. I had people calling me saying, hey, or texting me, hey, I seen Donald. You might want to look in this area. And I appreciated that. But as far as cameras, baiting, spotting is
the thing.
Is the thing. I think people, I think my family that helped me, I appreciated that. Riley, I mean, he was good, and if it wasn't for my wife of just letting me go and be me,
disappear for 4 months,
she's pretty good at that. Equipment, of course, we talked about the spotting scope. If you're gonna go, I think, like she sort of taught me, it's sort of stupid to go out there and spend all this time and you can't really look at a deer and know what it was. And for me, my bow, my Garmin, I'm old, to reach up, range find, put down, I like that. And I'm not waving, how do I put this? The first time I went out there, I had a little tent, and Seth knows me. I spend out. I got to be perfectly level. I use my phone and stuff to level,
very, very particular
level the
about
ground.
how level is.
So I'm running around. I'm trying to find a place, and I mean, I'm like an hour and a half trying to find a place to put this tent up because I am extremely. And I sort of thought, no. And so I've rolled with a bedroll my whole entire life. I can level that thing up, the back of my truck, and it's just the way for me to fly, because with the foam in it, and for you guys, I'll throw you a bone. If you put an air mattress underneath that foam, oh my gosh, you can throw it out in the ground, and this will make sense. That all the little bumps, the air takes care of that, and then you just have that nice.
You got nice level foam.
I pounded it every day, and it was good to come back to my bedroll and get a good night's sleep. It snowed on me. It rained on me. I don't know. That's just the way I roll. And I sit there, I'd be up on the mountain, and I'd be thinking, okay, what's the number one? If I did one of these podcasts, what would I tell people? And I'd have to tell them, hey, bedroll, canvas cutter's number one. I couldn't do, because we would come in the canyon and say, hey, let's go. We got to go to the other side. We'd jump in our truck, roll it up. And if we had a camp set up, we wouldn't have been able to do that.
Yeah, be as mobile.
So that was, if somebody was to ask me, optics, my wife taught me the lesson. If you're out there spending all this time, you got to be able to tell what they are, and you're wasting your time.
Yeah.
And
well, it was an incredible experience. And thank you for coming here and sharing it with us again, and sharing your viewpoint with it. And those guides were spot on. Like, for a 66-year-old guy. 65. For a 65-year-old to be out there busting these hills that a lot of 20-year-olds can't bust out, and to do it every single day, all summer, all hunt long, like, is incredibly impressive. And it was super awesome. I'm super proud of you. It was an awesome hunt, and you killed it. Like, every day I was just like, yeah, that's my dad. He's just like crushing that mountain right there. And it was awesome. So, but we have a lot of hunts ahead of us and a lot of stories to tell. So we'll get to that. But
yeah,
thanks for coming on.
Hey, thanks for having me. hopefully, guys, live your dream.
Yeah.
Live your dream. And when you pull the tag,
Give it your all.
give it your all.
And don't regret.
I don't mean to carry on, but if I would have, it's sort of a catch-22. We can end this way. If you pull the trigger on a smaller one, then you're always going to think, oh my gosh,
What if
there's the bigger one,
Yeah.
And so it's sort of a catch-22.
Yeah.
You got to and I'd made my mind up. Donald.
Figure out what you want and then go after that. Whatever that is. It could be like anything over 180 I'll take. And then that's awesome. But that wasn't your goals.
No.
And so
Yeah.
we tried to reach them. Okay. Thanks, Dad.
Thank you. What do you think?
Dad, thank you so much for coming on the Cuttercast and sharing that hunt with me and with everybody watching and listening. I want you to know that I am proud of you. You are an incredible man and an incredible hunter. I've never seen somebody hunt so hard and scout so hard and to have such a positive attitude on something that a lot of people, I think, would walk away with negative feelings towards. And thank all of you for watching and listening wherever you might be. If you would do us a favor, please hit the subscribe button, like it if you will, leave a comment. Please leave us a review and make sure you're following the Cuttercast on whatever podcast platform you may use. And until next time, bye.